And with that, we are live. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Wherever you're joining us from, welcome back to the Light 'em Up Lounge. Welcome to another inspiring and enlightening conversation, back with an industry expert panel. You know, we love to shake things up every now and then. Whilst normally we have one star guest from the industry, today we have three of them, and in fact, many more people joining us here via Zoom, but also on the Facebook live stream. I'll introduce our panel for tonight in just a second, but I wanted to wholeheartedly welcome all of you. Thank you for your continued support and for joining us yet again. If you have any questions, please chime in, make yourselves heard, either here at the lounge, or if you're joining us over on Facebook, then please put your thoughts, your questions into the comments right underneath the live stream. I'm always checking in order to bring your questions to our panel. And so without further ado, here we are welcoming the one and only Professor Jose Blanco. Welcome, Jose.
Always a pleasure, and especially to be with my counterparts, my longtime friend Jay Davis, which I don't like him a lot, but he's okay. And of course, Karl, which in my opinion is one of the rising stars of the industry, but I hope his head doesn't get bigger. His body's gotten bigger, but I hope it's not as bad.
Well, Jose, so you kind of already introduced the other two members of our panel, which is perfect. No. Jose, you take it from here, okay? How about you just you just introduce? No, I'm just kidding. It's a pleasure to welcome from Dallas, Texas. In fact, from Blue Smoke of Dallas, the one and only Mr. J.R. Davis. Thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely.
And to round things off, from the Stogie Lads, joining us live from beautiful Swedish countryside, Karl, many thanks for joining us tonight at the Light 'em Up Lounge. Welcome, buddy.
Yeah, thank you for having me, as always. Reinhard, it's great to see you, and Jose. You call it an expert panel, and you say it's three members. I'd say it's two members of the expert panel, and then I'm kind of tagging along, even though Jose is introducing me very kindly. But yeah, thank you so much, Reinhard. It's always great to be here.
Karl, I always appreciate how modest and humble you are, but most certainly, as Jose said, you're building the Stogie Lads into a wonderful brand. You're establishing yourself in the industry in a very spectacular way. You've built the community, which we all know is very tough to do. You're bringing people together. That's what Light 'em Up has always been about from day one. I just rushed here literally from number 6 Cavendish. I'm in London at the moment, and I just had the privilege of sharing a Miracle Cigar together with AJ Patel. And Ian, our dear friend who's normally here at the lounge, was with us as well. So he might only join later, but we had the privilege of sharing this wonderful cigar. And I just made it in time to be here and kickstart the live stream. But, you know, we wouldn't miss one single show. And here we are. There's plenty to talk about today. The PCA trade show is 2-3 weeks out, roughly. We're close to the halfway mark of 2023. There is, there are certain dynamics in the market which we're experiencing, pardon me, both in the United States, but also in the Eastern Hemisphere and all the international markets. And that gives us plenty to discuss and talk about. But Jose, I would love to start with you. Give us a little bit of your feeling and what you're experiencing at the moment. Like myself, you're traveling an awful lot. You meet so many people, whether it's the retail community, the end consumers, the cigar aficionados. Of course, you have your finger on the pulse with the manufacturing and the tobacco side. So here, at the end of June 2023, what's your feeling and what has your experience been so far for this year? And what are some of the things that you have seen and that probably either got you excited or a little worried? Tell us a little bit about 2023 so far for you.
Well, to be honest, and it's funny because yesterday and today I've been talking with a lot of friends in the States and talking with a lot of friends, and I'm the first one to admit I have admitted on my show and many shows where I've been a guest that me and many others so-called people got it wrong. And I'll tell you when I say got it wrong. Because first in the beginning, when COVID hits, we were all kind of worried. But then we saw a great 2020, a great 2021. And then we thought 2022, going by what the boom of 96 and 97 was, 418 million to 466 million, we thought it would go down. But on the contrary, the imports went up. And like I've said in many shows, the boom of 96 and 97 was a boom only in the States. Now we're doing a worldwide boom. And not only that, we're seeing countries that did not have that culture or the amount of clubs or cigar shops. And sometimes we're contacted by countries that right now we don't have more cigars. We haven't opened up a new country in the last 2.5 years, where there's even in small countries, 3 and 4 distributors trying to find anything they can to bring in. So we will see what the show in Vegas will tell us a lot, because what happens in Vegas, you go around, you see the discounts. Last year, there was not a lot of heavy discounts with the brands. But when you see after the show, companies doing like at the show was 1 and 10, and then you see 2 and 10, and then you see 3 and 10, then you know the show was not a good show. Also, something we have to look forward to is also Dortmund, because the European market, because of the shortage of Cuban cigars, and because a lot of people realize that there were other oranges, especially from Dominican Republic and Nicaragua, there were with great prices, great consistency, great manufacturing, just amazing cigars that all of a sudden are in love with them. So that's what basically what I'm seeing.
Well, Jose, it's very interesting, and the way we composed our panel tonight, obviously, is we want to look at different, how can I say, different stakeholder groups within the industry. So we want to look at the manufacturing side and the raw material, the tobacco side. Jay, you are one of the most accomplished and one of the most well-respected retailers in the United States. And so you also have a very particular view on things and a particular perspective when it comes to the industry. Also, you're heavily involved with the PCA organization. So please share a little bit of your experience and how 2023 has panned out for you so far.
Well, personally, 2023 has been relatively flat. I mean, I think we're up 8 or 9%, but when you count price increases and inflation, that means we're essentially flat. I think in 2021, cigars flew off the shelves. In 2022, it took a little bit of work. Right now, things are kind of back to where they were before COVID as far as the effort to sell cigars. The difference is we're at a much higher point. I mean, we're selling a lot more cigars, us personally, and throughout the United States. In a lot of ways, we're very blessed in the United States. We have access to a lot of cigars that are difficult to get in the Middle East or in Asia or in Europe. You know, like to me, I'm smoking a Fuente Rosado, a cigar that Fuente makes basically for brick and mortar retailers. And it's probably very tough to get that in Europe. I mean, Jose would know, because I know that it's been very difficult to get Cuban cigars throughout the world. And if you can get them, and if they are real, they're very expensive. So I think things are going in a good direction. From the PCA's perspective, it's been a very good year. Usually we spend a lot of time defending crazy laws, and there's still a bunch of that. But this year, in the last 12 months, we've seen 8 states adopt tax caps, most recently in Nevada. We have seen a couple of states looking at cigar bar legislation. We have seen 3 of the larger legacy companies in Swisher or Drew Estates, STG, and Altadis coming back to the trade show. I think those are all good things. So I think things are on the positive. I think that one of the things the pandemic did, at least in the United States, and I'm getting the sense globally as well, Jose, and you chip in on this, is people that we had lost during the first cigar boom, all of a sudden started coming into our store. Women who had been, I think, smoking cigars, but maybe buying online, not as comfortable with the lounge. We've been seeing a lot more ladies coming in, buying cigars and staying and smoking, which that is something that we've been trying to encourage, but we've seen a lot more of that in the last 2 or 3 years. In Dallas, ever since I started smoking, there's always been a large contingent of African Americans and Hispanic Americans who smoke cigars, and we're continuing to see strong growth. So everything is better than when I first got in the industry in 2010. And I do believe that a lot of the cigars that are coming to the market are quite good. The only issue is I think that there's too many. When the FDA passed the deeming regulations or announced them in 2016, there was a rush to get a lot of different brands on the market. And I think that that's caused retailers to be in a difficult situation between focusing on consumers wanting what is new versus what is good. And I'm old fashioned. So people ask me what's new. And I've had several people come in as of late and I'm like, this is new. And they're like, what is that? I said, this is called Ashton VSG. It's brand new in the humidor, which is a little bit of a fib because it's been on the market for 24 years. But for a lot of clients, they've never smoked an Ashton VSG. They don't know the story behind it or why Carlito Fuente gave it that interesting name. And I won't share that since we're on public airwaves. So part of our job has been to educate people, but there's definitely a willingness of people to try new things. The biggest challenge for retailers is what do you put on your shelf? And I'll add one other thing. Jose mentioned about discounts. And I think that's a problem in our industry. I know a number of retailers that it's always about the deal. I don't buy for deals. If I need something, I'm going to buy it. I can't tell you how many times I will put in an order and the rep will come back and say, well, if you order 4 more boxes, you get 2 more free. I'm like, that's what I need. And I never, if you give me a deal, great, but I'm going to order what I need because otherwise you're getting bribed into buying things that won't move. And as a retailer, you know what moves and what doesn't move, ultimately what your customers want. And you can have 100 free boxes of something, but if it's not a good cigar or if it doesn't sell, what's the point of getting a discount on those cigars if you can't sell them?
Very interesting points, Jay. And what's also very interesting about today's panel is that not only do we see like the full spectrum from the manufacturing end to the end consumer, but also different age groups. Karl, you are one of the Jose called it the up and coming stars of the industry and a great talent. You're one of the young generation of cigar enthusiasts, and in fact, with the Stogie Lads platform and community, you reach an awful lot of young cigar enthusiasts who might be new to the ecosystem and this wonderful lifestyle. What are some of the feedbacks that you're gathering? What are some of the experiences that you hear? What are some of the thoughts that you hear amongst the people in your network, in your community, when you sit down with them for a cigar or over on Discord? What's your impression of 2023 so far, and what's got people excited here in June 23?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to hear the perspective of Jay. He says he's old school, and of course he has more of a connection to the brick and mortar level, maybe. And I mean, for me, my connection is, like you say, it's very online. It's what the young kids would describe as chronically online, probably nowadays. But I'm just interacting as much as I can with cigars online, as you say. But what Jay mentioned is actually fascinating, that he said a lot of older smokers coming back. I mean, I've actually noticed that a lot on social media as well. I've interacted with so many people that said that they smoked for years and years and then stopped and came back to their humidors and reached back. I know people personally. So that's really fascinating how that translates, and you can really feel that through every single medium. And also what he said about new brands, I think it's very true. A lot of younger smokers, and I feel I'm myself connecting with that. I mean, when I was starting out, I like to try what was new on the market. A lot of that stuff is being pushed. I mean, if you're getting into cigars and you're reading Half Wheel, perhaps what you're getting sort of exposed to is the new stuff. I mean, I don't know how far you'd have to scroll to see anything mentioned about Ashton VSG, for example, which is a spectacular cigar. But when I mention these tried and true classics for people, I try to recommend, I mean, people know here, Jose, how much I love Fuente. I like to recommend the cigars that I love, Don Carlos, for example, and sometimes people are a little surprised at how good those are. Perhaps, I mean, I know we've talked about this for a long time ago, but with the increasing production and there's a little more construction issues than I remember when I started, and that's only like 6-7 years ago. And I think that's also something that people are getting more impressed by when they're going back to Fuente, Padron, Davidoff, even some of these classic brands that really pride themselves on that consistency, is that perhaps people are getting introduced maybe a little the wrong way, trying to try some of the flashy stuff. Of course, not going to name names, but sometimes I think, like Jay said, there's a lot of really good older stuff that people need to look at. And I think for the people that really are truly passionate about cigars, people that got into cigars during these pandemic years, when they finally reach these older brands and really see everything that's out there, it's fantastic. And same with the Cubans. I mean, that's, being in Europe, that's all what I'm never stopping to hear about that. I mean, it's the Cubans. And I mean, what I'm seeing is a lot of Europeans trying non-Cubans. I mean, it's more and more every time we meet here on Light 'Em Up, Reinhard, we talk about this, and it's just growing and growing and growing. So many people I've met, talked to online have tried Fuente for the first time now, and they've smoked cigars for years. They're trying Davidoff for the first time because maybe they thought these brands were a little more expensive a few years ago. But nowadays, with the Cubans rising in prices, they're seeing them as very viable options, and that makes me very happy. There's so many boutique level brands as well coming to Europe, even small countries like our Baltic neighbors here. Like these small countries are getting distribution for smaller brands, and that's something that makes me happy. That's a good consequence, I think, of this Cuban price crisis here in Europe, at least. So like Jose said, I mean, the imports and exports everywhere has been growing, and we're seeing it in Europe as well. And I'm very happy about that. I think people are learning more, smoking more, trying more, and that's just always happy times for me.
Excellent point that you made, and I think we'll get to that in a second. We have to talk about two different dynamics, looking at the US markets on the one hand and the international markets on the other hand. I just wanted to go back to one point that I very much enjoyed. Jay, you mentioned that it's some of the people that the industry probably lost during the first boom that you now see coming back. Whereas if I remember a couple of months ago and throughout the last years, we were primarily discussing the number of new cigar enthusiasts and the younger generation coming into the picture. What are some of the things that you see in the retail shop every single day in terms of the demographic of people coming in who enjoy premium cigars? And do you believe the narrative that through the pandemic, a whole new audience was suddenly introduced to the enjoyment of premium cigars? Or do you think that the much larger impact was through established cigar enthusiasts who just happen to smoke more? So you have the finger on the pulse there. What's your impression?
Well, I don't know if cigar enthusiasts like myself or Karl really smoked more during the pandemic because we were already smoking multiple cigars a day. You had people coming back because they said flat out, I stopped smoking cigars around the year 2000 because the cigars were terrible. The construction was terrible. The burn was terrible. I didn't have anybody to help me in the shops. You also had the occasional consumer who maybe smoked 2 cigars a week. Well, now they are working at home and they are smoking 2 cigars a day. But I also think another dynamic is that a lot of people felt very disconnected during COVID. I was blessed, even though my store was closed, I was at work every day, and they didn't really have human contact. And I think in the United States, at least, there has been, I would call it sort of a European move of maybe my life should be more than just work. I think Americans tend to focus just on work. And I think people said, wait a second, why should I have a job that I hate and I don't like? Maybe I should spend more time with my family. Maybe I should spend more time exercising. And a lot of people have said, maybe I need to spend more time on myself. And a cigar is a great way to relax, to spend time with other people, and to focus on yourself. So I think that that has brought us organically some new cigar smokers. I'm not really sure if I answered your question, but I do think there has been a net growth of new cigar smokers. But I've also seen people that, they picked up smoking during the pandemic and it's come back. And just sort of as a sort of kind of response to Karl, I think it's great that people in Europe are trying non-Cuban cigars. I was sort of a non-traditional person. When I first started smoking cigars, I was making a lot of money and I had no interest in smoking cigars in the American market. I spent thousands and thousands of dollars each month on Cuban cigars. And after doing that for about 3 years, I just said, this doesn't make sense. These cigars, for the most part, have problems. They don't burn correctly. They burn unevenly. They don't taste right. And certainly I smoked my share of counterfeits, but I also smoked a lot of genuine cigars. And so I sort of discovered, this sounds weird as an American, I discovered New World cigars, free world cigars, what do you want to call them, after I'd smoked Cubans almost exclusively for 3 years. And then I discovered companies like Arturo Fuente or Padron or La Flor Dominicana or Tatuaje. I was like, oh my God, these cigars are less expensive, they're more consistent, and I enjoy them. Now, I still do enjoy an occasional Cuban cigar. Just recently, I smoked a Cohiba Talisman, which I think that cigar is running close to 300 or 400 euros. And when I finished it, and I was very thankful for the person that gave it to me, it burned great, and the draw was good, but it didn't taste any better than a $9 Havana 6 from Tatuaje. And I asked myself, why would I spend 400 euros on this cigar? I guess to quote Charlie Minato from Half Wheel, he said, the Cubans can make a great cigar when they want to, they just usually don't want to. But when we're seeing, I don't know how many cigars Cuba's making right now, I would guess 10 to 15 million a year. When you see all the cigars coming from Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic and Honduras, and from Costa Rica, with tobacco from Peru and Ecuador and all over the place, it's awfully hard to convince yourself to spend $100 or $200 or euros on a cigar when you can get a very, very good cigar for $10. I think this Fuente Rosado I'm smoking in the United States and Texas costs about $9. It used to be a little bit cheaper before inflation and whatnot, but it's awfully hard if you smoke multiple cigars in a month to convince yourself to pay that much. And I'm not saying that all Cuban cigars are bad. That's not true. There's many Cuban cigars I've smoked that I've enjoyed immensely. And I think choice is great. Although I have a lot of friends in South Florida that would be mad at me for saying this, I want Cuban cigars to be legal in the United States because I think two things will happen. Once people are all excited and that excitement boils down, people are going to start seeing the greatness of cigars that are available here in the United States. And I think two things will happen. It will force the Cubans to realize that they need to address quality. But also, wouldn't it be interesting to have a cigar with a Marifel wrapper with a filler for the Dominican and Cuba that's been properly fermented and aged? Imagine what George Padron would do with a Cuban wrapper on some of his cigars. And I think competition is good. And I think eventually Cuban cigars will be legal in the United States. And definitely in Europe, you're seeing it. Cubans are going to have to fight for their shelf space, just like Rocky Patel has to fight for his shelf space. And I think ultimately that's a good thing for the consumer. And ultimately it's a good thing for the men and women that roll cigars in Cuba, because you can't hold back the free market much longer. And this is ultimately, I think, a good thing for the people of Cuba and Cuban cigars, is they've got to face some competition. They've got to make decisions. When I was in Cuba, I saw a lot of factories. I didn't see many Polones. I didn't see much commitment to aging. Yet I went to Jose Rabadio's farm and we smoked what his family smokes. And that tells me right there that with Cuban tobacco, you can make a fantastic cigar for a good price if you do it right. And obviously with the tobacco they're allowed to keep, I think it's like 10%. They do a phenomenal job. So I'm just excited to see cigars in general improving in quality. And I'm glad that people across the United States and Europe and Asia are starting to experience all that's available, not just one thing. It would be like only be able to drink red wine from France, which is great wine. But there's great wine in Chile and in Australia and in Napa Valley and in Washington and many other places. And if you deny yourself of that, you're denying yourself of some of the greatest things that are out there. So I'm glad to see this is happening in the cigar world.
Excellent points, Jay. Jose, I would like to piggyback on two aspects that Jay had just mentioned. One being production numbers, and you briefly touched upon this when you mentioned certain numbers, and I think the import numbers into the US are probably the most accurate and holistic data that we have in that regards. And then the second aspect is the price point, because over the past couple of months, I would say, probably the last 1.5 years, we saw an abundance of new releases with a very high price point. And there were new brands that entered the market, hitting right on that premium and super premium price point. And at the same time, well-established manufacturers that are probably more known for their very affordable and very approachable cigars, trying to hit that high price point and create a new niche in their portfolio at a premium. So let's maybe start with the production numbers and what's your perspective when it comes to the availability of raw material, manpower, and how does that affect the number of cigars that we're currently seeing coming out of Honduras, Nicaragua, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, of course, or other origins like Mexico and Costa Rica?
Well, going first to Cuba, we got to go to a little bit of history. If you go to the year 2000, when the Cubans said they were going to make 200 million cigars, and we know that a lot of those cigars were turned back. Then they went to 170, then they went to 120, then they went to 90, they went to 70. And for what we're hearing, they made more or less 55 million cigars last year. The ones that are having a field day today, for the last year, more than any time I've ever seen, are the people who are making the fakes. Those are having a field day, and even a lot of cigar stores that have been around are dealing with both things because they have to, one way or the other, survive. Now, going to production, when you see that Habano says that they lost 50% of the tobacco, you know there wasn't 50% of the tobacco. Out of 9,800 curing barns, 8,700 went down. They repaired more or less 4,500. For the first time in the history of Cuba, the latest that the Cubans have tried to start tobacco has been the first 2 weeks of January. And this year they started in March. There was tobacco that was picked in April and May, and we know what happens when you have tobacco in May, the excess of rain. Still last week, in some provinces, they were still picking tobacco. So you got a lot of rain, and then you got that excess of heat. It's going to be very bad this year. If the shortage was bad last year and it's bad this year, for the next coming years, it's going to be worse. The idea of maybe one day seeing Cuban tobaccos, yes, they have to get their act together. And of course, I have to be honest, some people who know me knows that when I used to go to Cuba, I would bring back some tobacco. Sometimes I got some tobacco from Canada. And I did blend with a Cameroon wrapper, with a little bit of Piloto Cubano and some tobacco from Cuba, some amazing blends. But that is still far, far away from the reality. I hope that God gives me health and a long life to see. First of all, forget about the cigars, the freedom of the Cuban people. So the suffering stops. That's one thing. Now, when it comes to production, we got to look at two things, and a lot of people don't realize this. One thing is the import numbers, and the other thing is the consumption. That is what a lot of people that I talk to say, we have to see the show. Because right now, in the beginning of the year, in February and March, there were a lot of companies, and we don't name those companies, that were giving deals. And if you want to really have a thermometer, you just have to go to the big catalogs, and you will see from good brands, 10% off, 15% off, 20% off, 25% off. So when you start to see those things, you have to start and worrying a little. The other thing that shocks me, and to be honest, every time I see Half Wheel or Coupe or Cigar Aficionado, and I see this new company that nobody knows who the owners are, and already they have a price tag of $20 for a Robusto, $22 for a Toro, and $25 by a 6x60. I mean, I wish them luck, but I mean, I don't know. I've never heard of them. Sometimes they don't even disclose where the cigars are made, where the tobaccos are, nice packaging. Some of them are good, but is a new company that just came out and come out with a $20 cigar? I wish them the best, but only time will tell. Because what I've always told people during more than 30 years, when you create a cigar and you give it to somebody and that person says he likes it, forget it. You need to give that cigar to somebody that says, I love it. And I've always learned, if you try to create a cigar for everyone, you wind up having a cigar that nobody's going to smoke. You have to focus on different niches by country, by groups, and even by the ages in that. Because I can tell you, before somebody 25 years ago would start smoking, they would smoke the old brands. The young generation now, between 25 to 40, doesn't smoke his father's cigars, with the exception of the established brands, Davidoff, Fuente, Padron, Pepin, the companies that have been around. So what I'm telling you, and what we haven't talked about, how about the impact of social media? When I started, there was no such thing. Remember, Cigar Aficionado changes everything around, and Cigar Journal, and then Smoke Magazine, and then all the things that came out. But the impact of social media, we have to be honest, really was COVID. All the people who got on Facebook, got on Twitter, got on Instagram, all the virtuals that were done, all the information that we did in our show, that you did, that Coop did, and a lot of great media people out there that started to educate consumers, and they would hear the stories of how a lot of people started, whether it's a media person, whether it's a store owner, whether it's a manufacturer, whatever it was, even a salesman, how things started. So I think the information that the majority of the media has provided has been good for the industry, and I think it's not going away.
Jose, wonderful statement, and a lot to dissect there and to talk about. Jay, I would like to hand the microphone over to you yet again, and to just quickly deep dive again into the numbers of cigars coming into the US and the price point. Because first of all, for you as a retailer, what is people's reaction to the evolution of the prices, and in particular what Jose mentioned, a lot of new companies coming in there asking for a premium price, even though it's probably hard for the end consumer to understand why is the cigar priced at that level, what's truly behind it. Does it come from a legacy family? Does it have the right intent? Does it have all the substance and the essence to it that would allow them to go into that upper echelon, or is it just a fancy marketing story, and even fancier packaging, and then trying to tidy things up and piggyback a little bit, and jump on that bandwagon of the evolution of prices that we've seen recently?
I think people want to know, why am I paying so much? And, I always start with, you have to understand what you're paying for. I'll give Fuente as an example because I've been to their factory about 10 or 15 times. Typically, Fuente will bring tobacco into the factory that is anywhere from 4 to 8 years old, and then they'll roll the cigars and age them. I mean, I've seen Cuban Belicosos, which is an affordable cigar, 6, 7, 8 years after it's rolled, still sitting in an aging room. So it's hard to expect people to want to pay a high price point for a new brand. I know that this last year, Eladio Diaz came out with a new cigar and it had a pretty high price point, but Eladio was pretty well known to Davidoff. But it comes down to value. I'll give you an example. The company that you worked for, Marifel, the cigars came out and people said, oh my God, why would I pay $57 or $86 for the cigar? Who is this Marifel company? Well, then I would proceed as a tobacconist to tell them the 400-year history of Marifel. I would talk about the Don Carlos brand. I would talk about the Hemingway brand. I'd talk about the Partagas brand and the La Aurora cigars that contain that tobacco. And then I talk about that buy one. And what I found is your company was easy to sell. Someone would buy one cigar and then they'd be like, I want to buy the rest of the box. So obviously they felt that those cigars were well worth it. My biggest problem with Marifel, as you know, is I get 10 or 15 boxes and they're gone within 24 hours because the proof's in the pudding. The bigger problem is where someone buys a cigar that is $20 or $30 or $40 and they're like, this is terrible, or I don't get it. People love to talk about, oh, I'm going to compete with Padron 1926. Well, people forget that Padron started with bundle cigars that were maybe 10 or 15 cents cheaper per bundle. And they developed a customer base through very difficult times with the Nicaraguan Revolution. They kept their quality the same, and they eventually built into the 1000 series. I remember a retailer telling me a few weeks ago about when they first got a shipment from Padron a number of years ago, and it had an Exclusivo. And they said, oh my God, how are we going to sell a cigar for $5? The next day they called Padron and said, the box is gone, can we get more? So Padron just didn't start with $26 cigars or $30 cigars. We have people buying Padron 80th anniversaries that retail for about $34, $35 every day. But they've been doing this for 40 years. You guys have been doing this for 400 plus years, maybe longer. It takes time to build that brand. So I would say that most cigars that come out and it's from a new company and it's a high price, you might get someone to try it once, but lots of luck after that. There's a lot of very, very good cigars that are still in that. I would say 8 to 12 has probably moved to $8 to $14 a cigar.
So Jay, let me ask you this, with everything that you just said, first of all, do you see more of that happening? And also the point that I made earlier, that some of the very well-established brands that formerly were primarily playing in the range of very affordable, very approachable cigars at a lower price point, now reaching for that upper echelon. And then on top of that, given the situation with import numbers, that we're seeing a plateau or a slight decline in sales in general, how do you think that will affect those people in the next 6 months, 12 months further down the road?
Well, I'd say part of it, in the United States, you have basically two types of customers. There's a very large middle-class working blue-collar customer that is the majority of our clients. These are people that probably could not afford to smoke if they lived in Canada or in Europe. They love buying a cigar that is $5, $6, $8, $9. We've been seeing those clients they're really afraid to buy anything that's over $10. So they're happier with some of the other new offers out there, like the new La Roma de Cuba, Connecticut. And then there's a small segment that money doesn't matter. Those are the people that will look at, let's say, Marifel or Atabey and Byron, or they'll look at Davidoff White Label, or they'll look at some of the rare and exotic items from Fuente that maybe Prometheus releases. People are very sensitive to prices. And like I said before, when I was talking about your brand, if they believe there's value in it and if they have the money, they'll buy it. But we've been seeing the last 6 to 8 months, people wanting to buy cigars that are $10 or $12 or less. And even people looking at bundles of long filler cigar, if they can get 25 cigars for $80. So there's definitely price pressure to buy less expensive cigars. And that is the bread and butter of the United States. I get the sense, and I could be wrong, because all I have is Facebook and I haven't been to Europe in 10 years, is that in Europe, your average cigar smoker probably is more affluent than the average cigar smoker in the United States. So we may have more cigar smokers, but they don't have the disposable income to spend $25 or $30 on a cigar. And those people are asking, well, maybe instead of buying 4 cigars today, I'm going to buy 3. Or instead of buying Tatuai brown label that's $14, I want to buy Tatuai red label that's $8. So we're seeing a lot of that in the United States, particularly in the last 6 to 8 months. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Great point. And Karl, let me bring you in with your perspective as a consumer, as a cigar enthusiast. And in fact, we all are first and foremost cigar lovers, and we appreciate this industry so much. But with the people that you have close to you and what you hear from your community, is there a lot of excitement for those new products? Are a lot of people willing to put down that serious amount of money, whether that's now one of the Cuban cigars that has just tremendously shot up in price, but also some of those new releases? How do people react to that?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting you brought up this whole high price trend, because I wrote a few notes down. I didn't write too much, but one of my few notes that I wrote down was to be discussing this sort of new price trend that we're seeing. So on the same wavelength there. And I noted down because I remember when I was starting out, I remember reading about, the Davidoff Oro de Blanco, for example. I remember reading, that was less than 10 years ago now, just how crazy that seemed at the time. A lot of people just thought that was such an expensive cigar. And now you look at the market and my God, there's so many extremely expensive cigars out there. Oliva recently, $300 cigar. I mean, that shocked me to see. I mean, that's a company that usually doesn't do that kind of stuff. And another brand that I saw recently, Flor de las Antillas by my father, they're releasing a 10th anniversary. That's like a cheap regular cigar normally, and it's like a $40 new release. That doesn't really make much sense to me, that release, I have to say, because I don't think it resonates much with the consumer that Jay is saying that probably is normally buying the My Father Flor de las Antillas, which is a guy that probably smokes those quite regularly. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I like that brand. Wait, this is $40. That's not my kind of cigar. If there's hype, I mean, perhaps there is initial hype, but I'm not worried, but I guess I have concern for the long run idea of releasing cigars like this. Jay talked about the way you build a brand like Padron with time and dedication and quality. I think a lot of these new brands that are coming on the market maybe don't have that patience that you really do require for making cigars. I mean, it's a handcraft that by nature just takes so much time to make a cigar. And I think just if you analyze a business, it's quite costly to start a new business. And if you want to force a product on the market immediately, you're gonna have to recoup some of those costs quite fast. And probably that's a lot of the reason why some of these new brands are making quite expensive cigars from the get-go. Not because of maybe the quality itself of the cigar or whatever the raw materials are, but just because of the production cost and setting something up. So that's a little bit concerning. And I myself have experienced that. And I know a lot of my friends have, just looking at a cigar that is $20, $25, $30 and thinking like, this is not at all the level of quality that should reflect that price point. And that is certainly something that's concerning. Jay also said, price is very something that people are very sensitive to, and of course you have to back it up. Meripfel is a great example where there's actually an intrinsic sort of value behind the brand. I think a lot of the brands are taking a more lazy or a shortcut way though, by just calling a cigar limited. Because if you can't back up the price point in any other way, why not just call it a very limited production, and then you create hype that way? And I think the amount of limited editions we're seeing everywhere. I mean, Cuba started in a way 20 plus years ago, but there's limited editions coming out from every brand. The Flor de las Antillas, like I mentioned, I was surprised to see a limited edition from an everyday brand like that. So that's something that's quite crazy. And I wonder, I've been reflecting on this the last few months, maybe since the Cuban price increase. I wonder how much people took that in and saw the possibility of a market of extremely expensive cigars. Of course, you guys with the Meripfel brand, you guys started that project way before Cuba increased their prices. But I'm looking at some of these, $300 is crazy for a cigar coming from Oliva. Of course, I don't know more about that, but some of these brands, I'm just wondering how they are reflecting on that market and just maybe seeing the possibility now. I really wonder what effect that had, the fact that Cohibas now are up towards $100 for a regular production. It's crazy. But yeah, I guess the short answer is I don't know how well the patience is, because I'm seeing in the Swedish market a lot of boutique brands, sometimes quite pricey. They're becoming registered here, putting that payment down to enter this market, and they sell out fast. I mean, usually a new cigar in this market sells out fast. Here in Europe, especially smaller countries, we don't get too many new cigars, so people of course rush to try it. But I'm seeing a lot of them exit the market in a concerned speed. I mean, a lot of them are going out after just a couple of years. So I don't know how well they're establishing their foothold. And yeah, a lot of people may be rushing to the market, and you need patience, I think, with cigars always. That's how you really build quality in a good brand.
Amen. Jose, what's your thoughts on this?
Hearing Jay and hearing Karl, look, at the end of the day, my 2 cents is that I think in the last 4 or 5 years, people are more conscientious of what they're smoking. Even the guy who wants, and Jay can talk more about this than me, even the guy that wants that bundle cigar, he's going to try to find that $70 to $80 bundle, long filler, that has a good draw, that has a good taste, and it's going to satisfy you. For that guy that wants that bundle, believe it or not, that's his opus, that's his padron, that's his Davidoff. And a lot of people sometimes, we criticize, I don't criticize, but a lot of people criticize people that, smoke not cheaper, I never like to use the word cheaper, inexpensive cigars. Look, I got to be honest, I smoke $5 cigars that are worth $50. I smoke $50 cigars that are not worth $2. The problem is that today the cigar has to perform. You could come out with whatever the price tag is. That's not a problem. The problem is when you sell those 10 boxes to Jay, which Jay is not going to buy him that easy. But let's say the guy convinced him and whatever, and tells him a BS story. Jay smokes the first cigar. It was phenomenal. He brings in, he sells them out. But if that second batch comes in and there's problem with construction, the blend is not the same, you're picking up ammonia, the cigar's unbalanced, the cigar's one-dimensional, the cigar's not what you smoked in the first batch, that cigar that was sold at $50, Jay is going to have a hard time trying to get rid of those, and maybe we'll have to send them back and see maybe if he can get his money back. At the end of the day, it's 3 things: performance, performance, performance. Today, years ago, you could do whatever you want. Those days are over. You have to make great cigars, consistent cigars, where quality is above anything.
Now, obviously, we have heard, we have read, and we have seen that there's a slight tendency in the US for cigar sales going down. Jay, do you think that is because retailers have just stocked up and they have their humidors filled to the brim, and probably the same for the end consumers, that they have just stocked up and have a lot of cigars at home now, so the urgency to buy is lower? Because I think it was last week or the week before on the Cigar Authority, David Garofalo and his crew, they also spoke about them being slightly worried where the next couple of months in the premium cigar industry might lead to when it comes to sales and the numbers of cigars being imported and sold effectively. So do you think that will, I think they called it on the Cigar Authority, blood on the street, and that there will be more discounts and you will cigars going at a lower price? Do you actually see that on the horizon? And how will that affect the retail community?
I do see, I don't know if I'd say blood in the streets, but I do see that it's becoming harder for retailers to sell cigars. I don't want to use the term that we're drowning in inventory, but it's a borderline issue. The funny thing is, I'm not drowning in the inventory that I need. But I think that there's definitely a move towards more affordable quality cigars. Jose mentioned, I mean, I smoke Cuban Corona from Fuente all the time. We sell that cigar for $6.20. And Lou Rothman is still right that profits is margin times turns. You have to have cigars that will turn. So there are certain cigars like Hemingway signatures. Thank you, Jose. I'm getting 50 boxes I ordered a year ago this week, and I'm so excited. It's not a question of whether those cigars will sell. They will sell. So I think retailers, at least the smarter ones, were a little bit more leery of putting a lot of money in brands that are not tested. I mean, Fuente sells, Padron sells. If you're an appointed merchant, Davidoff sells. Perdomo sells. La Flor Dominicana, if you can get cigars from them, they sell. Rocky Patel sells. So I think that the pillar companies, particularly with their affordable cigars, will still sell. But I think we are definitely going to see I don't want to use the word recession. That's a bad word because our numbers are so much higher than they were in 2018 and 2019. I think you are going to see a pullback in the number of cigars. And I think that those cigar retailers who continue to buy the deals and continue to just put whatever on the shelf, they're going to suffer tremendously. The smart retailers are going to carry tried and true cigars that are at good price points. And I think we'll be okay, but we're going to have to work a lot harder and a lot smarter. But ultimately, that's the key to brick and mortar. If you provide good customer service and you pay attention to your clients, you'll be fine. One of the things we've always done at my store, somebody will come in and they'll tell me kind of what they want, and we'll try to figure out the type of cigar they want. And then I'll say, how much do you want to spend today? And I get this weird look. I'm like, you don't like going to a car dealer and your budget's $40,000, they're going to sell you a $70,000 car. How much do you want to spend today? And they might say $25. How many cigars do you want to get for that $25? Oh, I mean $25 per cigar. Or a lot of people will say, I want to get 4 cigars for $25. Then I will go into the humidor and I'll make recommendations in that $6.5 price range that fit to the types of cigars that they've mentioned that they've liked in the past. Every once in a while, you do get that customer to come in. I don't care. I just want quality. But those are the exception. And we've always tried to maintain it with people. If someone comes into my store and their expectation before they walk in the door is to spend $50, I don't want them to spend more than $50 because I want them to come back over and over again. And so I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a shrinkage. Sales might go down 10 or 15%. But if you do your job as a brick and mortar store, or if you're an online provider and you provide better service, then when that customer decides, I'm going to stop buying from these 6 stores, I'm going to buy from these 4 stores, these 3 stores, I think that the well-run shops will do okay. But on a macro level, I think the industry is probably going to drop 10 to 20% over the next 12 to 18 months. But I don't think it's going to affect the quality tobacconists, but I think it is going to affect the stores to just throw whatever they have onto their shelves and expect it to sell.
Another very challenging aspect about that is, and Jose, maybe you can speak a bit more from brand and manufacturing side. I mean, once you as a brand go into that area, once you start to play that game of putting a certain discount on your product, in essence, you have forever devalued that particular cigar or that brand, and there's no turning back, because how can you convince a customer or a retailer even that, you know, the cigar is truly worth 10 euros when suddenly you can get it at a discount with 20, 30, God knows, 50% off? What does that mean for the brands, and how do you see that panning out?
You know, that's a good point. And this is something we've seen during years where you have a brick and mortar shop like Jay selling X brand for $10. And then you have that same brand from that very big company that you could get that cigar. Okay, 5 cigars at Jay's store is $50. At that online shop, it's $25. It's the same cigar, same company, the same thing. But then the salesman of that company wants to go over to Jay and says, Jay, why are your numbers down with me? Well, you know what, buddy? If I didn't have to compete with the online with the online people, the business would be different. And I think, to be honest, even though I haven't been working in the States in the last 3.5 years, but I still have a lot of contacts, and I was in the States now a couple of months ago for 2 weeks, and I'll be working more. What I've always seen is that these companies want it both ways, and you can't have it both ways. It's like the guy that walks into Jay's shop for the first time, and he brings out a cigar that he brought it online. So, and people, well, if you haven't bought it here, you can't smoke it. And we always said, do you bring a 6-pack to a bar, or do you bring a steak to a restaurant to be cooked? You can't have it both ways. But what I was saying is that I know that a lot of smart retailers and retailers that are doing good, what they have done, they have to carry 2 or 3 of those brands from those companies because they've had that client for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. But what they're doing is trying to drive their business towards the companies that don't discount heavily. Because if you bring in a brand that's discounting heavily, you're just sharpening a knife for your own throat. And that is something that for years and years and years, traveling for many years, I would tell retailers, why are you doing this? Why don't you work with certain brands, even some new brands that are good, try to push that brand that you know it's not going to be heavily discounted on the internet. But to be honest, some of them don't get it, and that's why so many of them fail. And I have to agree and disagree with Jay. We don't know till 2023 is over, and we see the imports numbers that still will take 3 or 4 months to see it, what really is going to happen. So what's going to really determine a lot is Vegas, then Dortmund. But what's going to determine is the 1st of September in the States, when those companies go out to visit the stores, what are the deals they have? If at the show they had 1 in 10 and all of a sudden they have 2 in 10, that tells you that the show was bad for them and they need to push product. So that's more or less the way I see it.
I couldn't agree more, Jose, and great aspects. Karl, over to you. We spoke about different dynamics in the US and Europe, and obviously whilst the US seems to have hit a plateau, in Europe still we're seeing tremendous growth, primarily for how George Brighton calls them, the diaspora cigars or free world cigars, due to the the disappearing stocks of Cuban cigars. What is your gut feeling as to how the market will evolve here? And do you think that over the next 12 months, especially the younger generation will even more look into newer brands coming up? Or do you also see a tendency where some of the younger generation, they probably, as you mentioned, they go back to the tried and tested, to the old classics, and maybe rediscover some of those gems from years gone by?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we are lagging behind a little bit. I think we're still experiencing probably growth. That's what I can tell. It's not as easy to find statistics. I think Half Wheel published something at the end of 2022, which showed that there was great growth. But I do think we are still lagging behind. I don't know that I'm seeing the same sort of stock issues in Europe. I think mainly because the stock issues have been Cuban cigars, so people are slowly consuming more. But I think a lot of the points brought up here by Jose and Jay are very, very true. I think there's a lot of because the industry's grown so much, and you can see this in any industry, and this is something you study in business and in economics and stuff. When an industry expands and there's possibilities for profits and entry of new companies, there's a lot of entry, and a lot of the times there's a lot of entry of crap. I mean, even kind of poor businesses can do well when there's a boom, quote unquote. And you see that with, like we discussed, there's new cigar brands coming in, new cigars that maybe aren't quite up to par, but also with retailers, like Jay said. I mean, COVID, it was such a paradigm shift. The Cuban situation is such a paradigm shift for Europe. And I mean, we saw this with the stores. Of course, COVID hit hard, but also consumption trends. I mean, a lot of brick and mortar stores here in Sweden shut down, and we don't have a lot to begin with. So we're down to very, very few. And online stores were taking over a lot. But something I've noticed the last maybe half a year or so, I've been talking to people, especially here in Sweden, that are tiring a little bit of some of these online stores. We have, I think, too many. I mean, the market is strangely saturated for being such a small country, and people are dissatisfied with the handling of the product. They're dissatisfied, like Jay said, the service. And I've heard a lot of people say that they're tired now of ordering online and are moving towards maybe going back to some of those physical stores that you have locally where you can inspect the stock, but also get a different type of connection. And they would rather probably pay a little more of a premium. And some of the people that were getting into cigars that weren't maybe serious about it probably dropped out, and that could lead to drops of sales for the online stores. And some people are getting more serious. Like you said, they're probably going towards older tried and true brands, but also, discovering the importance of taking care of the product and going to the right people for it, both to learn and to get the product right. But yeah, to answer, I guess, on the product, yeah, I think definitely people are trying more non-Cubans. I think we are, like mentioned, we are probably lagging behind a little bit because our New World stock is quite good. I mean, you can get Fuentes here, the Rosado Sangron series, we can get them, they're plentiful. The Hemingway series in Sweden as well, plentiful. But as soon as those start to dwindle, I think people will realize that that's very good quality stuff and move towards it. I don't think we are in an equilibrium quite yet in the market, but I think we will move towards it as crappy parties start to exit, and bad retailers don't see the profits anymore. When that goes away, I think that's going to be good. And when those brands that maybe shouldn't have such a big place on shelves start to also see the struggle of sales, and those start to go away, I think that's going to be good as well. But yeah, I think it's going to be very, like Jose said, it's going to be telling what happens in the coming year, probably years for Europe still, while we're adjusting. But I read actually today, it was quite good timing with this show, the new article on Davidoff that Half Wheel put out, and that there was one part of that actually gave me a little bit of a jaw drop, because I consider myself quite a cigar nerd, and I probably have a little bit of a tunnel vision in that sense, because when we get so engulfed in this in this community, we probably see it from our perspective. What the line that I read there was the fact that the Zeno brand had grown by 84% in 2022, and my reflection on that, I mean, everyone I've talked to who's in this more nerdy community, people that would be in this live stream, even people in the industry, were quite dissatisfied with that brand. I mean, it went from kind of a classy brand to a weird redesign. I personally hate the band of it. I think it's just tacky, and I don't have any affiliation, so I can maybe speak more frankly than some others, but I just did not like it. But the fact that that's grown so much shows that, there is a different consumption than maybe we think. I mean, I was so surprised. I was sure that was not such a successful rebrand, but I guess it is, and that's, I guess, something more opening up to everyone here. I don't know if everyone else is as surprised, but to me, that just, yeah, there's a lot of different consumers out that maybe I don't interact with on a daily basis. Maybe more casual smokers, more young smokers that might appeal to. I'm sure that was Davidoff's intent with that brand redesign, and perhaps it's working. I was just, yeah, that's something that I wanted to bring up because it surprised me so much that it's done so well.
So before we wrap things up, I would love to hear a bit of a closing statement from all of you, and maybe we can include a little forecast or a few expectations when it comes to the trade show, which is literally just around the corner. Talking about the PCA trade show coming up in July, obviously. And yeah, then what's your expectations and your thoughts for the rest of the year? And what are some of the things that you might be slightly worried about, or where you see certain writings on the wall? Jose, we'll start with you.
Look, we're all going to the show. In a way, it's good that Drew Estate will be coming back, and the other companies. It helps the PCA. That way, the PCA and the CRA have more money to fight legislation. To be honest, I got it wrong last year. I got it wrong in 2021. I hope that we continue with the sales. What worries me is really, without mentioning brands, that I've heard from a lot of retailers, especially in the States, a lot of companies cutting corners, underfilled cigars, bad construction, boxes of cigars that you open up, and it probably has good tobacco. Don't get me wrong. You smell it, and you can pick up the ammonias. So if you know a little bit about cigars, you know that you have to put those cigars away for at least a minimum of 6 months if it's good tobacco. Because something people don't understand, you have a box of cigars with bad tobacco, it's going to be bad in a year, it's going to be bad in 5, and in 10, it's even going to be worse. So what worries me, to be honest, is that every time I see Half Wheel, Coupe, Cigar Aficionado, and all the guys there, this new brand with this price tag, this company that nobody knows who they are, buying land to grow tobacco, to probably be able to use it minimum 2 years, and it's still not going to be age enough. Building factories, trying to get into partnership with established brands, willing to get into the business at whatever the cost is. I think some people think it's easy money, and unfortunately, a lot of people, when the shit hits the fan, they're going to realize it wasn't, because I've always said that history repeats itself. I hope in this case it doesn't, that the industry continues strong, vibrant, with a lot of good manufacturers, a lot of good stores, a lot of good salespeople. But I do worry. Look, in our case, some people say, well, you don't have to worry about Fuente. But you know what? At the end of the day, and Carlito has said this a million times, we all worry about the industry. We all want to be successful. And a good point that Jay made, I remember when Padron was only sold in cafeterias in Miami, and those cigars were 15 cents, 20 cents. And I remember when they came out with the 1964, and people said, who the hell is going to buy this at those prices? And guess what? Just like us, they cannot make enough cigars. You know why? Because it's quality, 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 performance, 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 consistency, consistency, consistency. So that's more or less the way I see it. I hope to see Reinhard in Vegas. I know I will see Jay. Maybe Jay will buy me a drink or maybe a bottle of water there, but he'll take care of me if I need something. He's my brother. And a big shout out to my cousin, Joey. You're lost in action, Joey. You're MIA. We love you.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes.
Jay, over to you.
I think that the 2000, and Jose may disagree with me, but I think 2022 was a horrible year as far as construction and quality, almost across the board. A few of the elite companies kept things up. In fact, I mentioned to Rocky when I saw him that I felt that Rocky Patel was one of the few companies that actually increased the quality of their construction during 2022. But in general, I've been very disappointed with a lot of the shortcuts being taken by a lot of companies. And I won't mention names, not because I'm bashful, but because we don't have another hour to mention all the names. So like I said, I think that there's going to be a flight to quality with both cigar manufacturers and cigar stores. I have friends who own cigar stores that are very successful in Chicago and New Jersey and California that are very high tax states, and they're doing well because price doesn't really matter that much if there's the service. So I think that the cigar industry as a whole will see some contraction, but I think that the companies that focus on quality, that focus on prices, will do well. I remember talking with George Padron at the Big Smoke this year, and I talked to George about his price increases. And he had this look like I just told him his mother had cancer. And he's like, we just spent so much time, so worried about raising prices. And I think the companies like that are focused on quality, that are very sensitive about price increases, that are very focused on those types of details will do well. And I think that those looking for the fast buck, you're in the wrong business. I have a law degree. If I want to make money, I'd be a lawyer. I wouldn't own a cigar store. So I do think we're going to see some slight contraction, but I don't think it's going to affect the big stores that much. And I am concerned about discounting as well, Jose. I have seen some of the big online retailers really providing some crazy stuff out there. But I think if we keep the focus upon quality and not devaluing the cigar, I refuse to do events with most companies because they want to give away the farm. And one of my conversations is, you're telling me this is a $10 cigar. Why are we going to buy 4, get 1 free? You're telling me that it's a $7.50 cigar. I don't believe in that. But to answer your question, I think that this next year will be good. I do think that the retailers that like to cut edges or cut corners, and the manufacturers like to cut corners, they're going to have some pain. But as Jack Welch used to say when he ran General Electric, sometimes you need to flush out the bottom 10%. And I think the market takes care of that. But I'm still overly optimistic. I think we're in what I'd call a bull market, a secular bull market. The premium handmade cigar industry will continue to do well. We may not see numbers as high this year as last year. I mean, who knows? But I don't think that we're going to go back to pre-pandemic numbers. I think there's more smokers. They're demanding more. And I think that there are a lot of good manufacturers that provide options. Not to keep tooting Padron's horn, I could just as easily toot Rocky Patel or Perdomo or La Flor Dominicana or Fuente, but a lot of these companies that have been around for a while, yes, they do have $25 and $30 cigars, but they still sell $4 and $5 and $6 cigars. So it's not just limited. I think these new companies, their only offerings are $20 or above is worrisome. One manufacturer who's very popular on social media, I won't mention his name, I basically got into an argument with him. I said, can you make a cigar that's less than $12? No, I can't do it for the quality. I said, well, you're never going to get market share. You have to provide a quality cigar for a good price. I think a good example of that is Nick at Foundation. Yeah, Foundation has got some cigars that are pushing that $20 price point, but Nick also has Chartered Oak. And a lot of those cigars are in the $5 and $6 range. So it's available even for a newer company to succeed. So I think the good manufacturers and the good retailers are going to be okay. But I think we're going to lose some chaff, and that's probably not a bad thing. And I'm optimistic. I think PCA is going in the right direction. There are still some things PCA needs to do, and Jose and I are both very, very well aware of some things PCA needs to do. But we're going in a good direction in general. And I feel like it's going to be a strong trade show. And I think the smart retailers are not going to fall for the, buy 100, get 50 free. And if they do, that's fine. I'm not one of those retailers. I'm going to buy quality. I never look for deals. I want to spend 10 minutes with a guy like Jeremiah Marithal, or 10 minutes with a guy like Lito Gomez, or, 10 minutes with Hector from La Aurora, and learn about cigars, learn about the process, learn about the passion, and then be able to convey that to my customers who buy their cigars. And I think that will be good. So I think that going forward, I think the next year and a half will be good. But like I said, I do think there'll be a slight contraction, but nothing like we saw in 2018. I mean, to give you a ballpark, we're doing 2.5 times the business we were doing in 2018. So even if I see a 20% reduction in sales, and like I said, I'm already up close to 10% this year, it's not going to be anything like pre-COVID, at least not for us or for other retailers that focus upon doing what's right for their customers.
Yeah. Excellent thoughts and insights here. I love it. What a wonderful show today. Karl, I would love to hear your closing thoughts, and I can only thank all three of you for a wonderful conversation. And I feel like we're living through a very exciting time here in the premium cigar industry. And yeah, please, Karl, your thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with you, Reinhard, for sure. There's not too much I can add I very much agree with both Jose and Jay. I think natural selection will take care of a lot. Like Jay said, I mean, 8.8% down was the Q1 result according to Cigar Aficionado in the States. But yeah, I don't see that as a problem. Like Jay said, I mean, if we're up that much compared to pre-pandemic, and there are so many people that got introduced to cigars during the pandemic that got introduced to fantastic stuff. Because even if the quality has started to lack now, it was fantastic. And I know so many smokers that got into it 3 years ago now. I mean, it's been that long, 3 years, and are still smoking, are still passionate about it. So a lot more people. And yeah, I mean, I guess the final thought I have is I've been so fascinated with the 90s cigar boom, maybe because it happened before I was alive. But a lot of the modern great companies that we see as big, great companies were ones that survived that time by doing things the right way. So I think, this mini boom that we've sort of experienced, I think if we can get some of the same results there, I think maybe the time of the boom isn't maybe the most important. I think what comes after that is great. And if we have more cigar smokers and cigar brands that survive that time and continue to push great stuff, that's just a fantastic thing for the industry. More stuff for consumers to try, more quality is always great. So I hope that's what the result is of this recent period.
Amen. Gentlemen, thank you so much for an incredible Light 'em Up panel discussion. It was a privilege and a pleasure to have you. I hope all of you enjoyed the show tremendously, at least as much as I did. Many thanks to Karl from the Stogie Lads joining us live from Sweden, J.R. Davis coming in from Blue Smoke, Dallas in Texas, and Jose Blanco, the professor, joining us here at the Light 'em Up Lounge. Gentlemen, many thanks for your time, for your thoughtful comments, and we'll see you all again next week here at the Light 'em Up Lounge. Until then, be safe, be well, and light 'em up. Goodbye, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, Reinhard.
Cousin Joe, Karl,
Thank you.
all the guys. Thank you. Good night.
Jose, we'll see you in Vegas in 2 weeks.